Each week we tell the stories of those wrongfully convicted and living on death row. And while it's true that a vast majority of cases involve sending innocent men to death row, there are also women facing execution whose stories need to be told as well. My next guest, Sabrina Butler Smith, used to be one of those women. Sabrina was just 17 years old when a predominantly white Mississippi jury convicted her in 1989 for fatally beating her 9-month-old son, Walter, and a judge sentenced her to death by lethal injection. It wasn't until several years later that an independent medical investigation found that her son had died from a genetic kidney disease. Sabrina spent almost 7 years in prison, about 3 of those years in a small cell on death row where she spent 23 hours a day with no human contact before being cleared of all charges in 1995. To this day, she is one of just 2 women in U.S. history to be exonerated from death row. And Sabrina Butler Smith joins me tonight by phone. Sabrina, it is such a pleasure to have you on. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
You were just 17 years old when your 9-month-old baby Walter died in his sleep due to an unknown disease, and then found yourself in an interrogation room for nearly 4 hours where detectives accused you of killing your child. You were a kid. You were distraught after just having lost your baby boy. You were afraid. You had no parent or lawyer present when you were being railroaded by these detectives, and you were eventually charged with murder. Tell us what happened that day before you realized you were being accused of killing your baby.
Well, the way it happened, the detective who was interrogating me decided to write a statement. And after 4 hours of interrogation, he shoved the paper in my face and told me to sign it. I was scared to death. I didn't know what to do. They were in my face like they were going to jump on me and all of that. And I was a basket case. I didn't know what to do. And I signed at the bottom of the page because I felt like that was the last ditch effort I had to try to get somebody to see that I didn't do this, that somebody would ask the question, why did she sign at the very bottom if she committed this crime? And it did pay off. It did. They saw it. That was a question that was asked during the second trial.
So walk us back, though, from the beginning of that day before you actually found yourself in an interrogation room. You went out for a jog, and then what?
Well, that particular night, I mean, what hurts me so is that Lil Walter showed no signs of being sick. I put him to sleep that night, and I decided to jog up to the end of the street where I live. Where I stayed, it was in a dead end. It was apartments that you could see the beginning of the street where they were. So I jogged up to the end of the street, and I wasn't even gone 10 minutes. Came back, and I went in the kitchen because I kind of knew when my son would wake up. So I went in the kitchen first, and I got a bottle, and I went to his room. When I went to his room, I noticed something was wrong, and he wasn't the way he was before I left. He turned around. He was a different way. I saw that he wasn't breathing. So I panicked. I didn't know what to do. I just ran outside, started beating on doors, and it was late over there where I stayed at, and no one knew me really because I, was a loner. I didn't really hang around anybody, so people were reluctant to open their doors. When one lady opened her door and she was saying that her kids were in the bed and she didn't have time, so she closed the door in my face. I didn't get any help from her. So when I ran downstairs, this girl from the end apartment, she grabbed my son and she put him on the floor and she started CPR. And when she did that, I was just out trying to get anybody that I thought could help me, to get him to the hospital. So I got this couple who was willing to take me. And when I ran back in, she told me to hold his nose, blow in his mouth, and press in his stomach. But she told me the wrong way. So I applied adult CPR to my son all the way to the hospital. But I didn't know that. I just was trying to get him to breathe. And I was scared at the same time. I've been here in Columbus by myself since I was 14 years old. No parents, no nothing. So I was trying to be an adult, but I was a kid myself. And they knew that, and they took advantage of that.
And you were actually, Sabrina, concerned about the fact that you had briefly left your baby for a jog. I mean, it never even entered your mind that you could be accused of killing him.
That was the furthest thing from my mind. I mean, When I got to the hospital though, and they took him from me, I'm a kid, and I just thought, I said, oh man, you're in trouble. That's the first thought came to my mind. You're in trouble for leaving your son at the house. But I never thought in a million years that they would come out and charge me with murder. So the first thing I said to myself was, you can't be honest. And I wasn't honest. I did just like a child would do if they're in trouble. And I wasn't honest when they were asking me questions at first.
So Sabrina, you had a legitimate explanation. That could have happened to anyone, but no one cared to listen. Police and prosecutors, they had their narrative and they were sticking to it, and your case actually went to trial. A jury of 10 whites and 2 black jurors convicted you. What happened to your defense? Why didn't you testify, or the neighbor who performed CPR on your baby incorrectly testify, or the neighbor that didn't help you testify, or the couple that ended up actually taking you to the hospital because you didn't have a car at the time? Why didn't they testify?
My attorneys that I had were ineffective. One of them was drunk during the whole trial. And the first chair, he didn't do any investigative work. He didn't call not one witness on my behalf, which I found was rather odd. But by me not really knowing the law, I kept begging to take the stand in my own defense, but was denied. They told me that just down and look at the jury, they got the thing nipped in the bud. Those were the words that they used. And I just kept looking at the jury, and I knew just by looking at these people that my life was over. I knew it because nobody looked like me. Nobody. So I knew that they were going to throw me away. I just knew that. So that's exactly what happened. Everything my attorney said, the judge didn't hear it. District attorney, he had a field day. He said everything he thought he could say. He alluded to the fact that I didn't testify, all kind of stuff, and that was illegal. He should not have done that, but he did. I was found guilty March 13th of 1990, and my death date was July 2nd of 1990.
So you're found guilty, you're 18, you were sentenced to death by lethal injection by a judge. Tell me about the moment when you arrived on death row. The cell that you were presumably going to spend the rest of your life, or at least your life up until your execution. What was going through your mind? What was that like?
It was so hard because whereas I lost my son, and the whole time I was incarcerated before I went back on the second trial, I never knew what he died from. Nobody never told me. They also never told me that the state had to exhaust all state remedies before they could actually carry out a death sentence. So I didn't know that either. That was one of the hardest moments of my life because I actually thought they were going to kill me. To be on death row and innocent it's already bad for people to actually commit crime. I didn't do anything wrong. And there I was trying to, nobody listened to me. I couldn't do nothing but cry. It was nothing for me to do. My life was in their hands. And I could just remember pacing the floors and listening for all the chains and all the sounds because I thought I actually was going to die. I wouldn't wish that on anyone. And the way the state sanctioned killings is wrong. They're using this thing as the death penalty as a weapon. And I think that is so wrong. You cannot tell me that gosh, excuse me. I get really emotional because I talk as much as I can, and I hope to bring a voice to all of the people that can't talk, because this is wrong what the states are doing to us as human beings. They tried to take my life from me. I sat in that cell 2 years and 9 months of my life for nothing. They knew I didn't commit no crime. They knew all the time that my son had kidney problems, heart problems, and chronic bowel syndrome. It was nothing that I did to cause his death. I have a daughter today that has the same exact disease he died from, the same thing. And they can't tell me anything.
That's what I was going to say. Well, you know, after spending almost 7 years in prison, you finally got some new counsel. They ended up actually calling the appropriate witnesses in your retrial, medical experts that actually pointed to the fact that your son actually died from a chronic disease that your daughter suffered from later as well, and a jury found you or acquitted you of all charges, and now you are working and dedicating your life to helping those in similar situations where they're on death row for a crime they didn't commit. I mean, Kevin Strickland was just released after 43 years there in Missouri, so we can't thank you enough, Sabrina Butler Smith, for all of the work that you've been doing. And I know it's easier said than done, or it's easy to say this because I wasn't accused of a crime I didn't commit and sentenced to death, but your life and your experience, it means something, and it's going to mean so much to others, and it wasn't for nothing. So again, thank you so much for sharing your story.
Thank you so much. I sure appreciate it for having me.